Quick disclaimer, as a recording, this game is in early access, so anything mentioned in this video could be subject to change. And there's likely new content that was released after this video, and so is not included. So treat this as a sort of rough outline of the game if you're seeing this sometime in the future. So, I recently acquired a new game. A game that makes you ask questions such as, am I schizophrenic? Why is one of my hands grey and the other purple? And of course, should I drink the dubious concoctions dropped by my enemies?
Finally. Piss.
If for some reason you answered yes to any of those, I hope they're treating you well at the psych ward. And also, you might like this game. What is it, you might ask? Well, it's called Dungeons of Blood and Dream. It's a retro-styled roguelike where you play as a blood wizard trying to escape the mind prison. Along the way, you'll find numerous trinkets. Oh, spells.
He's shooting me.
Bladed weapons. And several other occupants of the prison. All while fighting only the finest evil beings and whimsical nightmares in order to find out which one of them decided to trap you here, and is there a way out. There's a lot to cover in this game, so I think it's best I start from the very beginning and explain things along the way. So, without further ado, let us venture into the world of Dream. Starting out, this guy, who for now I'll refer to as L, tells you he's the one who trapped you in this prison because he simply doesn't like your magic.
My patience hath been exhausted by thine hateful magics.
And soon enough, you find yourself within the game's first level, the dungeon. Armed with only the finest British greeting device, and your magical left hand that can also block damage, should things get dicey. Now, this mechanic was explained to me twice when I started out, and still I went a full 4 hours before actually remembering to use it. The first time being in the game's manual, which explains the core features of the game, such as combat, what items to look out for, and what to expect going forward. Of course, I did read this before playing, but somehow still failed to comprehend the action pressing Q on my keyboard. But I digress. Now, you may have noticed the HUD is rather large. Of course, it being in line with the retro style, it takes up a good portion of your screen. Now, some may find the HUD inconvenient, or even claustrophobic, but I think it helps sell the fact that you're trapped within a prison of the mind, especially when you consider the fact that a large part of it is dedicated to containing the voices in your head, or, as the game refers to them, the masks of poor souls within your own mind prison. That makes you think, are we really that different from the one who trapped us here? Or is L giving us a taste of our own hateful magic? Also, the HUD is quite similar to that in another retro-styled game that was covered at length by another mentally unstable resident of the island. The HUD also displays the usual things, your health, a map, and your bank balance, and also this little guy. Now I'm not too sure what this guy's meant to be. He's separate from the other masks, and from what I found, he just reads out whatever may be in front of you. In case, you didn't already perceive it with your own eyes and brain.
This is a door. Alright, thanks for letting me know.
But with his guidance, you are able to progress through the dungeon, and you'll soon encounter the first of the game's enemies. So I think it's best I teach you about how to defend yourself, as of course, I'm quite familiar with such weaponry. Well, defense is easy. If something is attacking you, just press Q, providing you remember to do so. But on the offensive side, your sword, that to begin with will be broken, has 2 attacks, a slash and a thrust. Which attack you use won't matter too much with your starting weapon, but if you find a new one, there's a good chance it will deal more damage with one type of attack rather than both, with a few exceptions. For example, the first weapon I got my hands on was the sickle, and while it didn't do much thrust damage, it was very good at slashing.
Oh, holy shit.
As well as your 2 attacks, you can also switch between a left and right pose, depending on which direction you are last moving. Now, I don't think this has any effect on combat at the moment, and I only made use of this mechanic after acquiring an item that explicitly stated an effect when using it. But of course, the best offensive option at this point is to simply kick anything that moves. And that just about covers it for the basics of combat. But what about magic, I hear you ask? After all, you are a blood wizard. Well, you see, you start out by not knowing any magic at all. Unless you went full schizo and randomly started trying to cast spells until something happened. But you'll probably be dead before that happens, as magic here comes at the cost of your health. Because of this, I'll explain more about magic a bit later on, when we become more experienced. However, something you can use right away is the notebook. Used to draw, or write down, just about anything you want. Just try to save some pages for later. At this point though, you should be working your way through the dungeon. That works like most roguelikes. The layout is procedurally generated, with a few fixed points of interest that will always be in each level, which for now, there are 4. A shop in which you can find the trader NPC, an item room that will always contain a chest, a healing room containing a pool of water that can restore you to max HP, and finally, the boss room. Any rooms in between are usually occupied by several creatures, and in the dungeon levels include your common low-level enemies, such as goblins and spiders, as well as a few ranged monsters, but nothing your foot can't make short work of. Now, as I've covered just about everything within the dungeon level, I'll quickly mention some other things you're going to find throughout the entire game. First off, enemies have a small chance of dropping potions. Every potion they drop will smell like 2 different materials. And depending on which 2 materials you find fused together in sometimes quite questionable beverages, this determines whether or not you get a positive effect or a negative effect once consumed. On the positive side, these effects can range from increased attack speed, more vitality, and increased heart drops from enemies, to name a few. While on the negative side, you have things like weakness, slowness, and poverty. Yes, there is a potion that will reduce your income to that of the average small YouTuber. Now, figuring out what combinations are good or not can sometimes be difficult, especially when starting out. But if you use just a drop of common sense, you can decide pretty quickly whether or not you want to drink most potions. You find a potion that smells like urine and seawater. It's a no-brainer that your immediate and calculated response should be to slurp up every last drop.
The potion smells of urine. Alright boys, I think we have to drink the piss.
Moving on, 2 other things that will drop from enemies are concept brains and dream spheres. The dream spheres are used in a different realm which is accessed once you die, and allow you to make permanent upgrades to your stats. And if you so happen to find a brain, try asking about its concept with your fellow NPCs, as some will unlock new items and locations. And one last thing you'll find are rings, at the moment only obtained via the shop, the chest room, and bosses. These are crucial if you want to go deep into other levels, and have a plethora of beneficial effects. Most of them, anyway. I recommend trying out every ring you come across at first, because you won't know what it does until you put it on one of your fingers. But once you have, you'll keep this knowledge forever. Now, I'm not going to go over everything the rings allow you to do, but I will tell you, if you find a ring with a face on it, make sure that you put it on one of your thumbs. Now, try to ignore the voices in your head, as they'll tell you not to, but just do it anyway because it buffs your strength. It's basically free extra damage. Oh, and also ignore the pop-up message that says something is aware of your presence. It's probably nothing, perhaps a bug, I don't know. Okay, I know it's been pretty info heavy so far, but I've pretty much covered the basics of how to play. So for those that are still here, let's go deeper into the dungeon. So you've cleared out all the rooms in the dungeon level, acquired a few rings, and maybe purchased a new weapon from the shop. Well, now it's time for the first boss. Heading to the boss room, you have to drop down into the arena in order to summon him, and yes, there are ways to go back if need be. Once down there, you're prompted to ignite 5 candles surrounding a pentagram. After doing so, the Wizard Lord is summoned. Now, I know this is the first boss and all, but I found him to be pretty easy no matter what gear you have. You can't really go wrong if you just circle around him and attack once his shield is dropped. But I will let the difficulty slide because of the absolute banger that plays while you fight him.
Holy shit. Alright, jump over this. Alright, let's get him. We're fucking him up. Okay, not too hard. Yeah. We got him.
You get a few things after defeating the Wizard Lord. First, you are healed to full health, ready for the next level. And you may also get a ring and sometimes a few potions, as well as a Dream Sphere. Although I'm pretty sure at least one Dream Sphere drops 100% of the time from all bosses. A few pop-ups will show, saying that obelisks will now appear, and that you've unlocked Frog World. But don't worry, these aren't the ramblings of a lobotomy patient lost in the local pond. The obelisks will now show up randomly in any room that usually has enemies, and are there to spice things up and add a bit of an extra challenge. And Frog World is a secret level that at this point you probably can't access. There are a couple of other secret levels, so I'll go over how to enter them once we actually unlock secrets. He also drops a note that reads, the first letter of his name is L. Sounds familiar. For now though, let's travel through the portal and into the next level, the Slime Pits, also known as the French Catacombs. This place is home to a couple new slime-related creatures, such as the Slime Skeleton and the Slime Wizard. Lord have mercy, there was no need. There's also just regular slimes, but they aren't caked up. Now, there's not a great deal else to be said about this level, other than the new enemies and the fact that it's a bit of a step up in terms of difficulty. But this was the place I first used magic, so I'll give you the rundown of how to use spells. Throughout all levels, you'll find blood mirrors. Interacting with them will show a spell and the combination of symbols used to cast it. By default, this is done by scrolling through the symbols on your left hand, and choosing the ones you need by pressing middle mouse. Once selected, the symbol will show at the top of the HUD, and once a valid combination has been made, the spell is cast. But remember that each time you activate a symbol, it removes some of your health. Now, when you find a blood mirror and view the spell, it isn't saved anywhere, and if you don't remember the symbols, then you can't use that spell. If only we had something we could use to perhaps write these down? Yeah, at first this may seem like a bit of an inconvenience, but honestly, finding new spells and writing them down in blood was one of my favourite parts of the game. I think it's cool the fact you're trapped in a mind prison, powers crippled, you have to search through your dreams for these weakened, unreliable, and sometimes dangerous spells.
He's shooting me!
And remember them in order to aid your escape. I also like to think you once knew these spells before you were trapped, and because you've forgotten them and have to search your dreams, or rather your mind, to remember them again, they end up being these kind of wonky versions of what could have been very powerful spells. I know this may not be an actual part of the lore or anything, it's just a fun way to think about the magic. Okay, so here I was going to move straight onto this level's boss, but then I remembered that it was this boss that repeatedly slapped me back to the start, because his biggest counter was a certain mechanic that was lost in translation until much later on. So, let's visit the place you go after you die, the Mind Prison. Also, I realise now it may have been a bit confusing as to what the Mind Prison actually was. It's not the dungeons or the slimy French catacombs, it's this place. Here you can spend any dream spheres you collected to upgrade several stats such as max health and damage, as well as using some to repair your broken sword. These changes are permanent, so it's good to come back here now and again if things are getting tricky in the dream realm. It's also here that you find a puzzle that requires you to swap around letters to spell something out. And before we head back to Dream, make sure to talk with your reflection if you acquired any concept brains. He acts just like other NPCs, and lets you unlock new items if you have the right knowledge. But even if you don't have any, if you simply ask about who he is, you unlock secret rooms. These can now be found throughout all levels, and besides a visual change, are pretty much the same as the rooms of whatever level you are currently in, but have a chance to contain entrances to secret levels. This may sound a bit confusing, so I think for now, it's easy if we stick to the main path of the game and branch out into the secrets once we reach the end. One of the ends, anyway. So, let's continue venturing through the realm of Dream. So, as of writing this, there isn't anything that significant to talk about in the next two levels, besides an increase in difficulty. So I'll go over them quickly and mainly focus on each of their bosses and enemies. But first, at the end of the second level, you're greeted by the Slime King, who is a bit hard to deal with than the Wizard Lord, but is still pretty manageable if you just block every time he winds up an attack. My only minor issue, however, was with his spinning attack, where sometimes it would linger for a bit too long after the animation played, oftentimes hitting you when you thought you were in the clear. But this wasn't too much of a problem, and if it hasn't already, will probably be tweaked in the near future. Other than that, this is a pretty solid boss. Well, probably not actually, he's made out of slime. After defeating him, you get the usual things, a ring, potions, and a dream sphere, but he also drops a note that this time reads, the second letter of his name said, even though I was decapitated, I still stand. What does this mean? Well, going forward, the notes dropped by bosses will be riddles. Answering them all will give you the letters required by the puzzle back in the Mind Prison. Perhaps this is a way out? You also get a pop-up message saying you unlocked blood rooms, which is another secret level. And now you can travel onward through the portal and into the third level, River. Right away, you'll notice the floor consists of a small amount of purple liquid. Not that this is very interesting, of course a level called River has some amount of fluid in it, but I wouldn't have pointed it out if it weren't for the fact it makes spikes and other dangers quite hard to see. Although I myself have never been tricked by this hazy mirage, as I'm too spatially aware. I prefer to get gaslit into using magic in order to reach a closed off area of a level. Come to find there is nothing there, then impale myself trying to get back.
Maybe we're good. No!
The enemies of River are of course slightly harder than the slimy inhabitants of the level before, consisting of ball-slinging demons, skeletons, and one of the more annoying enemies, the Puffermen. Now they're not the most annoying by any means, and if you have the right weapon, they're pretty easy to take out. Also, you know, they seem to have had a bit of the slime wizard treatment, so I'll have to let them off for that. Holy Jesus. You'll also occasionally find this guy mixed in with the other enemies. He's referred to as a blood monster, but despite the name, he's not very menacing and tends to just waddle slowly towards you. Also, the dev kind of shot on him by calling him mindless in his description. Like, come on, show my boy some love. You only see him like once every 3 times you're actually in this level. This level's boss lair has its entrance covered by the purple liquid mentioned earlier, and managed to bait me into falling in the first time I encountered it, even though you can just look at the minimap and see if the room you're in is in fact home to an evil being. The evil being in question? The Necromancer, whose difficulty can vary depending on what you found prior to fighting them. Let's say you've got the starting weapon, and maybe a few rings. It shouldn't be too hard if you focus your attention on the boss and block any of its attacks. But God forbid you drank a potion of slowness beforehand. Then you'll be chasing the thing from one end of the arena to the next, all while its mischievous little theme song plays in your ears. Yeah, well I still died the first time, despite not being slowed. But let's say RNG is on your side, and you manage to smack the funky green fella into a cloud of red mist.
Yes. Okay. Jesus.
Once again, you will receive a note, and this one will read as follows. I am the penultimate letter of his name. I'm the eternal loop, the moon, and the sun. I think you might be able to guess what letter this riddle is referring to. It only took me a couple of seconds, and, you know, I am dopey. Now, after slaying another boss, we can once again traverse another portal, leading us to the fourth, but certainly not final level, Forest. Probably my favourite level in terms of aesthetics, but definitely not by enemies. See that little guy over there? Yeah, he's a gnome, right? We all like gnomes. You know, those whimsical little sprites that live in the woods, getting into all kinds of mischief. How the hell can such a creature be evil, you say? Yeah, well, these ones have guns. Yep, as in firearms. Oh, you can just dodge the bullets? Okay, sure, you are a wizard. That doesn't seem impossible. Well, go approach the little fella. Yeah, these have to be the single most annoying enemy in the entire game, and are probably the reason for some of the negative reviews. But you see, there is quite an easy way to deal with them, if you know how. Just make them fall into spikes. Or, if there's no spikes, just pin them in the corner and slap the living shit out of them. Both usually work. Venturing on through the forest, providing you haven't been taken by a gnome, you'll eventually come to the boss lair, keeping in mind that this level will be longer than the others as we are now deep within the dungeons. Lighting the candles, this time you'll be faced with the Hunter, a decently challenging boss purely because he continuously summons dogs to chase you down. However, the first time I fought him, I happened to be wearing a ring which spawned flames at my feet every time I jumped, making the fight somewhat easier, although the Hunter himself is still a bit tricky to deal with. Upon defeating him, you'll unlock the Hawk Eye that could be equipped in the Mind Prison, and, of course, a note. The right side of his throne is guarded by the letter B. Now, here you are once again. Having just defeated another evil being, you expect to see the familiar yellow portal waiting to take you to more curious realms. Except this time, it is different. But, it being the only way to go, you proceed. I see that you have reached the limit of dream. I've foreseen this turn of events, and I've prepared this fleshy trap for you, Blood Wizard. You will never escape my mind prison. I guess it will take a bit more than delving as deep as you can in order to escape. It is a fellow wizard that trapped you here after all, so of course it wouldn't be so simple. This ending, as of now, is probably the most bleak, as I assume you're trapped in this new, much smaller prison for eternity. And as it's just your mind that's trapped, who knows what will come of your physical form. But as you can see, this isn't the only way things can play out. Sure, it's a bit depressing that the first ending you reach is that of eternal imprisonment, but don't you want to get revenge on L? You've made it this far, and with all the knowledge you've gathered, you might just be able to show him some steel. However, you are going to have to visit a few more places before you can do so. First things first, let's try and figure out his name. We know it starts with L, and from the riddles, we can figure out that the name also contains the letters I, O, and B. And remember back in the mind prison there was that puzzle? Well, that's where we arranged the letters. However, the puzzle calls for 6 letters, and at this point, we only have 4. So, it's now time to enter the first of the game's secret levels. As mentioned earlier, secret levels are accessed via secret rooms within the main levels, once you have spoken to your reflection in the mind prison. In said rooms, there is a chance a portal will spawn, allowing you to leave the current level you're in without having defeated the boss and taking you to a new level. That was a lot of yap, so in short, find purple room in wall, find portal, leave. Now, what secret level you get sent to is just chance, so you'll need to potentially do multiple runs to visit them all. But let's say to begin with, you end up in Frog World. Why it's called Frog World, I'm not sure. From my knowledge, there's no frog enemy in this level, nor does it resemble a suitable habitat for an amphibian. There is an NPC in the form of a frog, so maybe it's his realm. Other inhabitants include goblins, failed experiments, gnomes, worm servants, and the recent addition of coin men. You may also run into the knight NPC, although he is not exclusive to this level. Working your way through and reaching the boss lair, here you'll summon 3 worms. They're not too difficult to take care of as long as you don't get greedy, and are a good way of farming dream spheres due to how many there are. Also, I think their music is another certified dungeon banger. Collecting your loot and picking up the note, this one reads as follows. The left side of his throne is guarded by a creature with fangs sharper than the needle teeth of a cat. Now, proceeding through this portal will take you to the next main level, whichever one happened to be next when you entered Frog World. But we have a wizard to kill, so let's run things back and visit another secret realm. Let's say instead of being sent to Frog World, the portal decided to take you to a more hellish place, the Blood Rooms. I'd say this level definitely lives up to its name, and it's home to some quite tough enemies, though it's roughly the same as Frog World in terms of difficulty. Here, you'll encounter an assortment of stronger, bloody versions of other enemies, mainly skeletons, spiders, and slimes. The skeletons in particular can be a bit of a challenge if you've entered here early on, and all enemies leave a trail of damaging blood that does a fair amount of damage. If I'm being honest, I hope this level gets a bit more fleshed out in the future, perhaps getting its own unique enemy instead of variations of already existing ones. Although it does have this weird vibe of being dingy and claustrophobic, but at the same time a bit cozy. Reading that over, I think I need to go outside more. The boss of this level are the blood golems, small creatures that act similar to the friendly ones you can summon. The first time I fought them, I somewhat underestimated how tricky it is to dodge the small projectiles they fire. But once you learn that simply walking around in circles makes it very hard for them to hit you, the fight becomes a lot easier. The note that drops from this boss says, "Kneel before him and you shall know the last letter of his name." And with that, we now have all the riddles to work out the name of the wizard that trapped us. At long last, we can get revenge for his trickery, and maybe we can escape these realms of dream once and for all. But first, you need to die, or rather wake up back in the mind prison. Once there, you can now arrange all the letters of his name, including the ones we discovered in the secret levels, those being M and K, to finally spell out Limbok. Yep, that is his actual name.
And it's open. We're free. We're free from his prison. Oh shit!
Well, not quite free. With the gate open, you can roam around the rest of the prison and interact with this bird? Anyway, doing so unlocks another secret level, the Caves of Limbok. Unlike the previous secrets, this one is not accessed via the purple rooms, but instead is now always available after defeating the hunter in forest. So onward, we must go. Traversing each level, once again, you want to make full use of your knowledge of rings to build up your power, and find a stronger blade. Optionally, you can visit a few secret levels along the way to make use of the extra shops and chest rooms. And once you reach forest and defeat the hunter, there will now be a second portal leading to the caves. Now, this is Limbok's personal corner of Dream, so it won't be easy unless you're very well prepared. Currently, there are only 2 enemies that reside here, Limbok's Flying Skull and the Limbok Demon. Much more powerful versions of the non-Limbok variants, with greatly boosted damage, health and attack speed. Given this level's length, it's quite easy for them to gradually whittle down your health while you traverse, especially if you encounter rooms containing lots of enemies. So making use of magic here, if you can afford to, helps out greatly. If all goes well, you'll hopefully reach the boss room with decent vitality. And you should be ready to face Limbok himself. I'm not sure if he's supposed to spawn in the wall. I fought him before, where he spawns in the center like other bosses, but I think it would be cool if he got changed so he's a lot bigger, but still comes out the wall to fight you. Regardless, he is dead. And, at long last, you are truly free. Escaping the mind prison, you will continue your path of the Blood Wizard. But is that all from the Dungeons of Blood and Dream? Well, no. As of writing this, there are 2 more endings, and a few more secrets. But if I haven't already spoiled it enough, I highly recommend you go and discover them for yourself. I also didn't cover every single thing in detail for the same reason. Because what I found most enjoyable from this game was its sense of discovery, and also the music. As I said in the beginning, it's still in early access, so it does need some polish and some more additions. Although it is a solo project, so as far as a beginning goes, it's pretty damn good, and I look forward to the game's future. I may cover this game again once there's more to discuss, and if this video is well received, as there is some pretty interesting lore. But I assume it isn't all there yet given the state of the game. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I encourage you to go check out the dungeons for yourself. I have a Discord server if you want to come say hi, but I strongly recommend going to the game's official Discord if you're curious about anything regarding the game. And with that, go forth, Blood Wizard.
What